He's the Assistant Commissioner for the Japan Financial Service Agency. Please, Mr.
Thank you very much, Mr. Al-Jazaf. It's a great honor for me to be here in Kuwait. I'm very happy because Mr. Al-Jazaf and I worked together at the World Bank for 3 years in Washington, D.C. So I'm pretty happy. It's the first time in 7 years or something to see him in Kuwait. That's why I'm feeling very happy to be here. So, as he mentioned, I'm from Japan, working on many issues. I'm Assistant Commissioner at the Japanese Financial Services Agency. Today, I wear some hats. One of my hats is Vice Chair of the Corporate Governance Committee of the OECD. So let me touch upon something about what's going on, what the OECD Committee on Corporate Governance is discussing now. And let me mention also what are the challenges for us and what are the challenges for Japan. And I'm trying to be provocative a little bit because there is no solid house view of the Japanese Financial Services Agency. So let me be a bit provocative and let me say something about minority view rather than majority view. This is outline of my presentation today. What can good corporate governance achieve? Is good corporate governance the only way to achieve growth? Mechanism for good oversight, mechanism for accountability, strict enforcement, and finally, overview of Japan's corporate governance, board structure, nomination, and oversight by shareholders. The first topic is about the importance and the implications of oversight and accountability of corporate governance. What can good corporate governance achieve? There may be three issues. Ensuring good and sound corporate decisions for better resource allocation, leading to more innovation and profitability. Number two, gaining investors' confidence and enhancing investment in and growth of the company. It's a kind of specific one. The third one is more general, attracting capital inflows into the market and enhancing growth of the country rather than growth of the company. What can good corporate governance achieve? The Corporate Governance Committee of the OECD has started discussion on value creation and growth. The relevant reference in the OECD principles of corporate governance quoted, quote, the corporate governance framework should be developed with a view to its impact on overall economic performance, market integrity, and the incentives it creates for market participants, and the promotion of transparent and efficient markets. So they attach importance to market development as well as growth of the economy. Then the question is good corporate governance the only way to achieve growth? Which is better for growth? Number one, quick decision making by controlling shareholders. Because in some countries, like Korea, in maybe Italy, there are lots of controlling shareholders which can dominate the boards as well. Number two, which is better? Number two, better corporate governance with good oversight and accountability in place. Which is better? Can we envisage the best corporate governance mechanism and measures to achieve quick and sound corporate decisions with results? That's a tough question to answer. Let me come back to this point a bit later in the context of the Japanese corporate governance. I'm sorry. Let me touch upon the elements of better corporate governance requirements. They include more independent outside directors, reduce the role of controlling shareholders, more protection of minority shareholders, and disclosure of the voting results by institutional investors. Yeah, they are commonly mentioned on various occasions, but the question is, should all of the above be regulated by law, or should we take a more market-based approach which regulates less and leaves evaluation of the company to the market and investors? Which is better? I'll come back to that point a bit later again. The mechanism for accountability. Accountability is important. Above all, enhanced disclosure is the core corporate governance element, because without full disclosure, the market cannot make the judgment of the real competitiveness, sustainable profitability of a company, and the degree of the edge over its competitors, and would not invest in the whole industry in the country. Let me take an example of Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola in the US. If there are no disclosure rules, mandatory disclosure rules in the US, if, very hypothetical question, if Coca-Cola does not disclose any financial statements, of course, we don't want to invest in Coca-Cola, but in that case, we couldn't compare Coca-Cola with Pepsi-Cola. So we're not so sure whether Pepsi-Cola has real competitive advantage over Coca-Cola. So I would hesitate to invest in Pepsi-Cola too, or even though Pepsi-Cola discloses everything, that could affect the whole attitude of the investors, that could give damage to the whole industry if one or two major companies do not disclose their information. That could hurt the economy as a whole. And number 3, fair value accounting rules and enforcement and implementation of them play an important role. Number 3, strict enforcement. Personally, I attach utmost importance to this one, strict enforcement. Any rules must be strictly enforced because fair and consistent application of the rules is crucial to gain market confidence. Good corporate governance regulations mean nothing without strict enforcement and could not attract investment. Because I work on all the Asian countries, I visited Indonesia on Monday and Tuesday this week. They are keen to attract foreign investments for their sustainable growth. That's the case with many emerging economies in the world. So that's why I emphasize the importance of good corporate governance, which could attract more foreign investment. Sufficient resources need to be ensured for enforcement in terms of the number of staff members, in terms of budget too. Then let me move to Japan's corporate governance. We are still struggling. We are still trying to improve our system. So I'm learning a lot from my experience with the OECD. What aspects are unique to Japan? We have very few controlling shareholders. Only 3.3% of the companies listed in Tokyo Stock Exchange first section have controlling shareholders. Disclosure and strict enforcement are the core elements of Japan's corporate governance. Then any unique elements in Japan's oversight framework? Number 1, board structure and nomination, and 2, oversight by shareholders. As regards board structure and nomination, we have the Companies Act, which provides for two options. Number one, company with committees model. It's a very new one, but it has something in common with many other developed countries. Number two, it's very rarely seen in the world. Company with audit and supervisory board model. Now, with regard to the company with committees model, 3 committees. Each shall have at least 3 members, nominating committee, a compensation committee, and an audit committee. More than half of the members of each committee shall be outside directors. So outside directors are mandatory in this system, in this model. But the share of this model is only 2.2%. The most common model is this one, number 2, company with audit and supervisory board model. No outside directors are required at all. Large and public companies opting for this model shall have at least 3 corporate auditors, not directors. At least half of them shall be outside corporate auditors. Pro is members of this audit supervisory board, away from business decisions, can concentrate on checking directors. Con is that members can raise their voice but cannot vote. Then there are issues for discussion. A mandatory outside director system may contribute to better corporate governance, but does it alone make a difference? Legal clarity. What's outside? Is it clearly defined? Without definition of legal clarity, it would not make any sense. The quality of outside directors. Investors need to check whether oversight by outside directors actually works effectively. For example, it's very difficult to ensure outside directors of high quality. Japan's approach is that non-mandatory outside directors with enhanced legal clarity and full specific disclosure on board structure. That's our system. Number 1, legal clarity. For example, Tokyo Stock Exchange securities listing regulations requires an unlisted issuer to secure at least 1 independent director or auditor. Independent director auditor is defined as outside director and auditor having no specific conflicts of interest with general shareholders. So it's defined in these regulations. The draft, in addition, our Parliament is now starting to discuss it. The draft amendment to the Companies Act provides outside directors exclude spouses and second degree, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it's very specific. And including mentioning brother companies too. And our government ordinance requires that annual securities reports stipulate the roles and functions of outside directors. The roles and functions of outside directors in corporate governance, and in case of not appointing outside directors, the alternative governance structure and rationale for adopting it. So if you do not adopt outside director system, you need to explain then what your system is and why did you adopt that system, the alternative for the outside director system. It's a sort of comply and explain. And finally, the draft amendment to the Companies Act, we are still discussing it, not finalized yet, but the draft amendment to the Companies Act requires certain public companies without outside directors need to disclose reasons why appointing outside directors is not appropriate for them. So we will require some companies to make excuses in public. Why you have not adopted oversight director system? The disclosure rule is not just a comply and explain. What to explain is specifically stipulated. The disclosures shall be included in the annual reports. And any violation of these disclosure rules shall be subject to penalties, fines, or administrative sanctions. The full disclosure requirement could result in more oversight directors. It may be extremely difficult to explain the reasons for not appointing oversight directors that can convince investors. It's very difficult to make excuses, convincing excuses. Let me skip this one. Disclosure of oversight. Number 2, oversight by shareholders in Japanese system. Disclosure of voting results. Government ordinance provides that listed companies shall disclose the number of votes cast for or against or withheld in additional reports. And enhanced disclosure by institutional investors, which is still being discussed. Institutional investors with fiduciary duties for their clients are held accountable for exercise of their voting rights and the disclosure of the action. We are discussing some options to be adopted, including the following. Institutional investors prepare and disclose guidelines on the exercise of their voting rights for their clients. Institutional investors disclose the voting results for their clients. More and more institutional investors have made guidelines on the exercise of their voting rights and disclose both the guidelines and the voting results. So the institutional investors, are increasingly playing major role in corporate governance, so we need to consider how to deal with them. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Oya, for a very excellent presentation and sticking to the time also. Just a quick note before we move to the second speaker. I think as we hear more and more presentations today, I hope it's not understood that the best corporate governance code is the summation of all the ideas and concepts that are presented today. And in Mr. Oya's presentation, we've noted that he mentioned in one slide the Japan's approach. I think each market needs its own approach, and that depends. At the end, corporate governance is change in behavior of the market participants, and the behavior changes from one market to another. The initial conditions of each markets vary across the globe. So, and it's a process. It's not just issuing the ultimatums or the regulations and you expect next morning everybody to comply. So it's a process that takes time, and it should cater for the initial conditions of the market on hand. With that note, I would like to pass on to the second presenter, Mr.